The voice echoed across the boardroom. You're going to make a Western with that voice? Clint stopped. 5 seconds of silence. Then he walked to the door. That silence changed Hollywood. It was 1992. Warner Brothers Executive Tower, Burbank. 15th floor. The kind of room where careers are made and destroyed before lunch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. Mahogany table. Leather chairs. 8 studio executives in expensive suits. And Clint Eastwood. He was 62 years old. 4 decades in the business. Actor. Director. Icon. He'd come to pitch Unforgiven, a Western he'd been holding on to for nearly 10 years, waiting for the right moment, waiting until he was old enough to play William Munny, a retired gunfighter pulled back into violence one last time. The meeting had been going well. Clint had presented the script quietly, efficiently. No sales pitch. No theatrics. Just the story. The executives had listened. Some seemed interested. The project had potential. Budget was reasonable. Clint's name still meant something at the box office. Then Roger Feldman spoke. Feldman was vice president of production. 43 years old. Harvard MBA. 3 years at Warner Brothers. Rising star in the executive ranks. He'd greenlit some mid-budget successes, killed some projects that deserved to die. He was smart, ambitious, and he never worked directly with Clint Eastwood before. I have a concern, Feldman said, leaning back in his chair, pen tapping against his notepad. The dialogue. William Munny is the lead. He's got a lot of lines. And Clint. He paused, looked directly at Eastwood. Your voice. It's very distinctive. Very raspy. Very quiet. You're going to make a Western with that voice? The room went still. 2 executives shifted in their seats. One reached for his coffee cup. Another suddenly found his notepad very interesting. Clint didn't move. Didn't speak. His face showed nothing. That weathered, lined face that had stared down countless bad guys in countless films. Neutral. Calm. Waiting. Feldman continued, not reading the room, not seeing the warning signs that everyone else had picked up on. I'm just saying, Westerns are about presence. Authority. John Wayne had a voice that filled the room. Even in his 60s, he commanded the screen. Can you honestly do that with... He gestured vaguely toward Clint. With the voice you have now? The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Clint didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stood up slowly. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just stood. He picked up his copy of the Unforgiven script from the table, tucked it under his arm. He looked at Feldman, not angry, not insulted, just looked at him with that famous Eastwood squint, for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked to the door. Clint, wait. One of the other executives, Martin Schaefer, head of production, started to speak. Clint stopped at the door. Didn't turn around. Spoke quietly, that raspy voice Feldman had just mocked carrying clearly in the silent room. I appreciate your time, gentlemen. He opened the door and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The boardroom erupted. What the hell was that? Schaefer turned on Feldman. What the hell was that? Feldman looked genuinely confused. I was just raising a legitimate concern about his voice? You mocked Clint Eastwood's voice? In a pitch meeting? Schaefer stood up, his own voice rising now. Do you have any idea who that man is? What he's done for this studio? The money he's made us? I wasn't mocking. Get out. Schaefer pointed to the door. Get out of this room right now. And don't say another word about this project. Feldman left. The remaining executives sat in stunned silence. Someone call Clint's office, Schaefer said quietly. Immediately. Tell him we want to meet again. Tomorrow if possible. Tell him Roger Feldman will not be involved in any further discussions. But Clint Eastwood didn't take that meeting. Not the next day. Not that week. The studio called. His agent called. Schaefer himself left multiple messages. Clint was polite when he finally returned the calls. Professional. But Unforgiven would not be made at Warner Brothers. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to understand what that voice meant. Not just to Clint, but to the life he'd lived to earn it. Clint Eastwood Jr. was born in 1930 in San Francisco. Depression-era childhood. His father was a steelworker who moved the family up and down the West Coast chasing work. Clint learned early that you didn't complain. You didn't make excuses. You worked. You provided. You endured. He'd been drafted into the Army during the Korean War. Stationed at Fort Ord in California as a swimming instructor. In 1951, he'd been a passenger on a Navy bomber that ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean off the California coast. He and the pilot had to swim miles through freezing water to reach shore. They nearly drowned. Nearly died of hypothermia. Clint never talked about it publicly. Never used it for publicity. It was just something that happened. After the service, he'd struggled. Bit parts. Uncredited roles. He'd dug swimming pools to pay rent. He'd been told he was too tall, his Adam's apple was too prominent, he moved too slowly. Universal Pictures had dropped him, told him he had no future as an actor. Then came Rawhide. 7 years playing Rowdy Yates on television. Not stardom, but steady work. Recognition. And that voice, already distinctive, already quiet and raspy from years of cigarettes and whiskey and late nights, became familiar to millions of Americans every week. Then Sergio Leone. Italy. The Dollars Trilogy. A style of Western that rewrote the rules. And Clint's voice, that voice Roger Feldman had just mocked, became the sound of cool, of danger held in check, of violence that didn't need to announce itself. The man with no name didn't talk much. When he did, that raspy whisper was more menacing than any shout. The voice became the character. The character became an icon. 40 years in the business. Dozens of films. Director now as well as actor. Academy Award nominations. Critical respect earned through decades of work that spoke for itself. And Roger Feldman, 3 years at Warner Brothers, had just suggested that voice wasn't good enough for a Western. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Clint Eastwood took Unforgiven to Castle Rock Entertainment. He'd produce it himself. Direct it. Star in it. Full creative control. No executives questioning his voice. No committee meetings. Just the film he wanted to make. The budget was modest by Hollywood standards. $14 million. Location shooting in Alberta, Canada. Small crew. Efficient schedule. The way Clint had always worked, no wasted time, no wasted money, no drama. Show up prepared. Do the work. Go home. The cast was perfect. Gene Hackman as Little Bill Daggett, the brutal sheriff. Morgan Freeman as Ned Logan, Munny's old partner. Richard Harris as English Bob. Every performance grounded, real, earned. And Clint as William Munny. A man who'd been a killer. Who'd quit killing. Who'd tried to build a decent life. And who gets pulled back into violence one last time because he needs money to save his children's farm after his wife dies. That voice, that raspy, quiet, weathered voice, carried every line of William Munny's dialogue. The voice of a man who'd seen too much. Done too much. Lived too hard. A voice that didn't need to shout to convey authority or threat or moral weight. When William Munny walks into the saloon in the final scene, wounded and deadly, and says in that quiet rasp, "I've killed women and children. I've killed just about everything that walks or crawled at one time or another. And I'm here to kill you, Little Bill, for what you done to Ned." That voice is what makes the line devastating. John Wayne's commanding boom wouldn't have worked. It would have been performance. Clint's raspy whisper was truth. Unforgiven premiered in August 1992. Critics called it a masterpiece. A deconstruction of the Western genre. A meditation on violence and aging and the myths men tell themselves. The New York Times said Clint had reinvented the Western. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and called it Clint Eastwood's meditation on age, repute, courage, heroism. The film made $159 million worldwide on its $14 million budget. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards. It won 4, including Best Picture and Best Director for Clint Eastwood. At the Academy Awards ceremony in March 1993, Clint walked onto the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion stage to accept his Oscar for Best Director. He was 62 years old. The same age he'd been in that Warner Brothers boardroom when Roger Feldman had questioned whether his voice could carry a Western. He stood at the microphone, held the golden statue, and spoke in that famous raspy voice that had just been validated by the highest honor American cinema could give. "This is pretty good," he said quietly, the understatement typical of the man. He thanked his cast and crew. He kept it short. Professional. No speeches about vindication. No mention of anyone who doubted him. He didn't have to. Away from the cameras, Clint made a choice no one expected. After the Oscars, the calls came flooding in. Every studio in Hollywood wanted to work with Clint Eastwood now. Projects. Offers. Blank checks. He could have made any film he wanted, anywhere, with anyone. Warner Brothers called Martin Schafer himself, apologizing for the 1992 meeting, explaining that Roger Feldman no longer worked at the studio. He'd been let go 6 months after the Unforgiven incident for reasons that were officially unrelated, but everyone knew the truth. Schafer wanted Clint back. Whatever project he wanted. Whatever terms he wanted. Clint was polite. Professional. He thanked Schafer for the call. But he didn't take any meetings. Didn't pitch any projects. Didn't return to Warner Brothers boardrooms. Instead, he kept working the way he'd always worked. Small budgets. Efficient schedules. Total creative control. He made the films he wanted to make. A Perfect World. The Bridges of Madison County. Mystic River. $1 Million Baby. Gran Torino. Each one personal. Each one made exactly the way he envisioned it. He won another Best Picture and Best Director Oscar for $1 Million Baby in 2005. He directed American Sniper in 2014. It made over $500 million worldwide and was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And through all of it, that voice, that quiet, raspy, weathered voice, remained his signature. The sound of authority that didn't need to raise itself. The voice of characters who lived full lives and had nothing left to prove. What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, forever. Roger Feldman never worked in Hollywood again at the executive level. After leaving Warner Brothers, he took a position at a smaller production company, then moved to television, then eventually left the industry entirely. He never spoke publicly about the Unforgiven meeting. But the story spread. In Hollywood, stories like this always spread. The legend of Clint Eastwood walking out of a Warner Brothers boardroom without saying more than one sentence became part of industry lore. A cautionary tale about respect. About understanding who you're dealing with. About the difference between authority that shouts and authority that doesn't need to. Martin Schafer, in a 2008 interview after he'd retired from Warner Brothers, was asked about working with Clint Eastwood. He told a version of the boardroom story, never naming Feldman, but confirming that a junior executive had once questioned Clint's voice in a pitch meeting. "Clint just stood up and left," Schafer said. "No argument. No defense. He just left. And I knew in that moment that we'd lost something we'd never get back. Because the kind of person who insults Clint Eastwood's voice doesn't understand the first thing about what makes him Clint Eastwood. It's not the voice. It's who the voice belongs to. The life that earned that voice. The work. The integrity. The fact that he doesn't need to convince you of anything. The interviewer asked if Schaefer regretted losing Unforgiven. "Every day," Schaefer said. "That film made history. And we could have been part of it. But we weren't. Because someone in a boardroom thought they could judge Clint Eastwood's voice." In 2019, at age 89, Clint Eastwood directed and starred in The Mule. His voice was even more raspy now, weathered by nearly 90 years of living. Critics noted that the voice had become part of the performance, the sound of age, experience, a life fully lived. The film made $174 million worldwide. There are interviews with actors who've worked with Clint over the decades. They all tell similar stories. About his quietness on set, his efficiency, his respect for everyone's time, and about that voice, how it commands a room without ever rising above a conversational tone. Morgan Freeman, who worked with Clint on Unforgiven and 3 other films, said it best. "Clint doesn't need to raise his voice. When he speaks, you lean in. That's real power." The lesson wasn't about defending yourself. It was about knowing your worth. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Roger Feldman asked the wrong question in 1992. He asked if Clint could make a Western with that voice. The answer came at the Academy Awards 9 months later. 4 Oscars. Best Picture. Best Director. A film that changed the Western genre forever. The voice didn't need defending. It never did. Clint Eastwood simply walked out of that boardroom, made the film his way, and let the work speak. That raspy whisper became the sound of one of cinema's greatest triumphs. Hollywood learned, real authority doesn't argue. It just walks away. And wins.